Yeah, that's a couple of great ones right there. Look at them, boy. They are dressed up for the event tonight.
My name's Mark Shemp, and I appreciate you joining us tonight for the Historic Preservation Society of Tullahoma's regular meeting, although with COVID and what it's done to our scheduling, we haven't quite had the regular meetings in the sense that we normally would have. But we did make it. We beat the weather tonight, and we are indeed fortunate that we've got Mary Ann Scott going to speak to us tonight about suffrage, the women's suffrage movement, 100 years old, and program. And I think in particular, she's going to talk about how Tullahoma, as always, contributed to it, and I'm grateful for her. Okay, well, with that in mind, I appreciate you being with us. I think you're going to find it entertaining and informative, more so than just entertainment. So Mary Ann, if you would come up, Marjorie, if you would be kind enough to come up or make the introductions in a more formal sense.
To have someone speaking on a very timely subject, Mary Ann Scott, and she has a terrific background. I think you saw it in the paper. Has a bachelor and a master of science degree in electrical engineering, and his master of doctor degree in engineering science. Has worked at UTSI and Department of Energy. So I think she's set a good example for any suffragette. She doesn't hesitate to take in what some men claim is their field, I think. But we're really looking forward to hearing her talk about suffragette movement and enlighten us the fact that Tullahoma had a part in it. So, Mary Ann?
The right of citizens to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. That's from the 19th Amendment. And since today is August the 25th, 1920, it's just been a week since our Tennessee legislators voted to ratify. So these empowering words are going to lead us forward. It was a battle, it was long, it was hard, but we finally prevailed. Unfortunately, a lot of the leaders early on didn't live to see this happen. People like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony. This has been going on for 72 years. They were some of the early women, and they're no longer with us. But I'm sure they're aware that we finally made it. For myself, I couldn't think of anything that I would have rather have done with my life than be part of this great cause. So, you ask, who am I? I appreciate you asking me here today to tell you about this journey. I was born just down the road a piece in Shelbyville. I was born Sarah William Knott, and my friends call me Will. When I was in school, I went by Will Knott, and some of my teachers didn't like it too much when I abbreviated my name to Won't. So I moved here when I was about 20. I married John Marshall Grantham in 1900. He was from Marshall County. You know M.R. Campbell, the hub and spoke place. Well, his older sister married him, so that's how he got his start in business. We had our first child in 1901, and a few years later, That was Mary. Lucy came along, and finally John Jr. in 1909. So once you have children, you start thinking about things that you might not have thought about before. As mothers, you're responsible for the health and well-being of your children, but their education, their health, all of those things are governed by laws that are made by man. So we have no control, we have no representation. We care about what happens to our children, so we want to vote to be able to control those things. Why do we want the vote so badly? I'm not terribly good at words, so I'll read you a couple of things that our leaders said about why we want to fix what's broken, things that are wrong. Susan B. Anthony said, "It is a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them provided by the Democratic Republican government, the ballot." Carrie Chapman Catt said, "The answer to one is the answer to all. Government by the people is expedient or not. If it is expedient, then obviously all people must be included." And Alice Dudley, who was a suffragist in Nashville and wife of Godfrey Dudley, said, "I have never met a man or a woman who denied that taxation without representation was tyranny." Another Tennessee suffragist, Catherine Keeney, also from Nashville, said, "I am a suffragist because I believe that God created man and woman equal. I believe that equal suffrage is not so much a question of expediency as one of fundamental justice. The interests of men and women are not superior nor antagonistic one to the other, but mutual and inseparable." The Susan B. Anthony Amendment, which we just passed, was first introduced in Washington, D.C. in 1878. And here it is, 1920. It failed, but they kept introducing it over and over and over again until we prevailed. We didn't start making a lot of headway until the 20th century. And at that point, there wasn't even agreement on how this should be approached. Some people said you need to modify the state constitutions. Others said it needs to be the U.S. Constitution. The first state, before it was a state, that allowed women to vote was Wyoming. It was still a territory. But when it became a state, it kept that. So Wyoming was the first state that allowed its women to vote. Our leaders recognized that we needed to come up with a different approach, that we needed to put ourselves out more visually to impress the public opinion that we were doing the right thing by asking for the vote. So the visual, you think about pageants, you think about parades and demonstrations, and there were also a group of more militant than our group here in Tennessee who picketed in D.C. in front of the White House. They gave Wilson a really hard time. Color was important in these activities. Our colors: purple, dignity, honor; white, purity; and the golden yellow for hope. They ended up with yellow rather than green that the British had because of something that happened in Kansas. They had a convention out there, and the flower of Kansas is yellow, so we went to yellow instead of green. We're not devilish Amazons that are out to destroy the gender hierarchies in our nation. That's what some of our critics claim. We're not that at all. We're intelligent, beautiful women who are going to put some civility into politics and cleanse the system of corruption. People across the nation took notice in 1913 when there was a large parade arranged at the day before Woodrow Wilson was to be inaugurated. There were thousands of people. There were floats, there were walkers, there were people from universities. It was all coordinated, and it was nothing like a parade, a pageant that had been seen in DC before. It got kind of rowdy at the end, but it definitely made the newspaper headlines across the country. So we had people's attention, and maybe something is going to happen here. Nashville followed suit in 1914, where they had their first May Day parade. And they continued doing this every year until World War I came along. My friends here in Tullahoma and I were watching all this and keeping up with what was going on. They had a hard-fought grassroots effort to get the whole state of Tennessee organized to work on this movement. So when I really got involved was in May of 1915. The Tennessee Equal Suffrage League came to Tullahoma for its executive meeting. They needed to figure out how they were going to organize across the state for the year. And after they had their meeting and discussions, they came to us to help us organize. We had over 20 women that were willing to sign up for membership. I was elected their president. We had first vice president Minnie Roth, second vice president Ada Lott. Other members were Ella Ransom, who is my sister-in-law, and who did I forget? There's one I forgot. Louise Dan. There's a connection there. Campbell and Dan. Louise was connected that way. And another lady, Beulah Parker. Her husband was into lumber. So it was wives of several of the prominent families here in Tullahoma who were organized in this. So we set out to educate ourselves. We had a couple of leaders from Nashville come to talk to us and figure out how we get going. And then we turned around and we started helping them organize. We went to Manchester. And then a little bit later, Francis Hickerson helped organize in McMinnville. We were always at the state meetings, especially the executive board meetings. In early 1915, I was selected to be vice president at large for the state of Tennessee. So I had a major role in all of the planning that was going on within the state. But one thing that I really, really enjoyed that year, this is 1916, was the May Day parade. We had 25 women from Tullahoma that took part in that parade. Myself and many walked. This was the first time they had done the walking. They just had floats and cars. But our leader in Nashville walked with her children, and she made a big deal of, we want to be close to the people. We want them to know that we're real and we have this thing that we're going to make happen. The Tullahoma car was decorated with yellow daisies, and the women carried white parasols that were trimmed in daisies. The Hickerson car was decorated with the suffrage colors. Walking, it started at 8th and Broad and made a little circle, and then it headed off to Centennial Park. It was just amazing, the excitement that was in the air. The streets were lined all the way down to Centennial Park. I've never done anything that was quite so exhilarating as to showing our colors and our purpose. Once we got to Centennial Park, there were some pageants, there were speeches. There was one float that had ferries, suffragist ferries, and there was a ballet. So it was really something else. They had never seen any parade like that in Nashville. Then the Great War came along, and we turned most of our efforts to supporting that. Whether we were knitting or growing gardens and saving food and all of those things that we took part of. We kept the suffragists push on, but it wasn't as strong because we had the war to worry about. But there was an interesting thing that happened. There was a shortage of men. There's, over towards Winchester, there's a big 40-acre field that owned by the railroad that was planted in hay. They had cut it, and it was in windrows, and it was that time of year when you worry about the rain's going to come, and there weren't any men to take up the hay. So they sent an SOS out, and there were 6 other women and I. We put on our gauntlets, buckskin leather gauntlets, jumpsuits, went out to the field and worked for several hours in the morning and took a lunch break, came back in the afternoon, and our supervisor said we'd done as good as any man could do. And our shots were well proportioned and symmetric. We were so proud of ourselves. There were some issues with the organization in the state. There were 2 of them. And Ann Dallas Dudley was one of the ones who worked to get everybody pulled together. I worked with her closely over that 5 years, and came to really respect her abilities as a leader and her empathy for all the people that she dealt with. I was appointed to be a delegate to the National Convention along with Frances Hickerson, as well as 25 other women from Tennessee. It was to be in February of 1920. I unfortunately didn't get to attend. I missed the opportunity, but I didn't miss the weather, Chicago weather in February, that's for sure. And I was pleasantly surprised that I was given an honor. My name was one of several Tennessee women who received a certificate of service for honorable service. So that made me feel very good. We had our last convention this year in June. Given that we were close to reaching ratification, we recognized that we really needed to start thinking about educating women on responsibilities of voting and the rights as well as the responsibilities. So we started this transition from the League of Equal Suffrage League to the League of Women Voters. And I was given a position at the state level in that as well. In July and August, there was heavy lobbying going on. By the 1st of July, there were 35 states that had voted to ratify. And there were 5 left that it hadn't been considered, and they felt that you might get a chance. Tennessee was one of those. People were concerned about the South, whether it would be possible to get ratification here. July and August were really, really hectic in Nashville. The Heritage Hotel was used as the headquarters for the suffrage, or SUFs, but there was also an anti-suffrage league that their headquarters was there too. So that summer we had the War of Roses. The SUFs were yellow, and the antis chose the red rose, the American Beauty. And what would happen is we had the responsibility to approach all of the legislators and try to convince them to vote for us. And if they did, we buttonholed a yellow rose in their lapel. So you saw lots of red roses and yellow roses running around. November is an election, so Governor Roberts was reluctant, despite being pressured, to hold a special session. But he was also pressured not to hold the session. He finally gave in, and there was a special session that opened on August the 9th. By August the 13th, the Senate had approved a resolution by a vote of 25-4 and sent that resolution to the House. They started debate, and August 18th, a week ago was a pivotal day when everything came to a head. The gallery was full of antis and suffs. The the representatives were resting. There was a lot of talking, whispering, people up and down the aisles. Seth Walker, Speaker of the House, had formerly been for suffrage, but then he changed his mind, and he was now against. And he made a motion to table. There was a roll call. The vote came up 48 to 48. Since there was not a majority, the tabling failed. So you can see how his mind is going here. 48 to 48, if I make a vote on the resolution now, it'll fail. Let's do this. So he made that motion to vote on the resolution. Of course, in between this, there were speakers up and down, for and against, speaking very strongly for what they believed. Did the roll call again. In this case, it was, okay, I forgot one thing. When it was 48 to 48, there was one House member who changed his vote. They had expected him to vote vote to table the resolution. But he was down at the bottom of the alphabet and he voted the other way. So now they have the roll call vote, and it's 49 to 47. The vote that was changed was from Harry T. Byrne. I'm sure you've all by now heard of Harry T. Byrne. He was the youngest member of the legislature house, and he was from Nyota. He had received a letter from his mother urging him to vote for suffrage. She was highly educated. She was a farmer, owned property. She was also a member of the Women's Club there in the Penn County. And part of what she said, why don't you help Mrs. Cat put the rat in ratification? So he voted, and it was now 49 to 47. But then Speaker Walker changed his vote to aye and immediately asked to rescind the vote. Because if he stayed with the no, he couldn't have done that. You have to be on the winning side to have it reconsidered. So for the next couple of days, there was a lot of machinations going on, but ultimately it failed. And the governor signed it yesterday and sent it to DC. So we are going to have the right to vote. But I skipped over this part. Back in 2019, the legislature did vote to let women vote in presidential elections and municipal elections. So on the 19th of this month, Tullahoma had its city election. The women polled just as heavy as men, and a progressive ticket won. We all know that Tullahoma is a progressive community. Captain B.H. Wilkins was elected mayor. Don Campbell, Leonard Robertson, Ed F. Wilson were elected aldermen. Tullahoma was in general in favor of ratification. Unfortunately, we were very chagrined by the position of our representative, Mr. W.C. Thornsberry. He had since moved to Nashville, being a state official, one of the fire marshals. So he voted against it. Martha Lanham, who was chair for the 5th Congressional District, took a petition from Tullahoma to Nashville, to Thornsberry, asking him respectfully and faithfully represent his constituency. So for the last 5 years, I've done a lot of traveling, had a lot of meetings, had a lot of lobbying with various people. Our work entitled Some Fundraising, and one of the things that we did, we had a bazaar, and it was located at the local millinery owned by two sisters. And we also, this wasn't fundraising, but it was part of our lobbying effort. Tullahoma had a 7-day Chautauqua. We put up a rest tent, baby rest tent. So mothers who were there trying to enjoy the entertainment, and their kids got, I'm tired, I'm ready. Place for them to go and rest. And that also gave us a chance to meet with the women and to discuss what they needed to know about, what we wanted to share with them. So that was another really good thing. So again, I have to say that there is nothing that I would have rather been doing than to be part of this movement. And thanks for listening to me.